Great to have you back here for our final formal session of the afternoon, maybe an absolutely critical one, because is it the case that cities are the space within which we innovate and transform? They have the scale to make the difference, and they often have the leadership to drive change forward. This is the session that's going to reveal what's going on in cities and how they could be and are the driving change for the circular economy. And to run our session, please welcome to the platform its two facilitators, Tiina Keho and Marja-Leena Rinkineva. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for the kind introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and warm welcome to this session about circular cities. My name is Tiina Keho, and I'm the Executive Director of the Helsinki Metropolitan Smart and Clean Foundation, which is a 5-year step change project transforming this whole area to be the best testbed in the world in smart, clean tech and circular solutions. I believe we can make this happen, but it requires a lot of collaboration with all of you guys. In this next 1.5 hours, I believe that you will all realize 3 things about how we can make circular economy happen. I believe it happens in the cities. That's the #1 thing. The implementation is there. But secondly, like I said, we need a lot of collaboration between different stakeholders, including us citizens, businesses, research, and of course the cities and the state. And then third, but not the least, we believe that this creates enormous business opportunities which the cities can then enable. And I have with me here Marja-Leena Rinkineva, please.
Yes, hello, hi, I'm Marja-Leena. I'm the Director of Economic Development in the City of Helsinki from the Mayor's Office, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to Helsinki. I have a dream. My dream is to make Helsinki zero-waste city. And I believe that with this conference, with these 2 days, I'm going to make it with the help of you all. Helsinki is committed to become a global role model in promoting the circular economy. We have been circulating our beer bottles and soft drink cans for decades already, but also we have new wonderful initiative from the bottom up from our citizens. Just one example is a wonderful, I would call it an invention. It's a cleaning day. It's 2 times a year. Our people, our citizens, take their things and stuff that they don't need out to the streets and parks and sell them there or just give them up. And I think that's really circular economy. And turning the whole city as a flea market, that's something that really makes me believe in my dream. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one of our key initiatives is the Helsinki Metropolitan Smart and Clean project. And
indeed, like I said, we are leading this very exciting operation for the next 4 years. Still, last year we started and kicked off the whole project. And without very ambitious targets, I don't think we can make it. Our ambitious target is indeed, like our Helsinki mayor just said in the opening speech, to be the leading circular city in the world. But not to forgetting the citizens, we also want our citizens and inhabitants in Helsinki region to be very resource-wise, and we will learn more what that means. But it means that we really need to involve everyone in this game. Please.
And as stated, the cities will lead the development towards circular economy. But what are the future circular cities? On that, Dimitri Tsengelis, the co-head of climate policy from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Dimitri is responsible for producing, commissioning, and communicating research on the economics of climate change policy. Please give a big hand to Dimitri.
you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I think we all know what we see as a circular city. Clearly, it's something to do with efficiency. It's to do with use, reuse, and recycling. But I'm going to talk about another element to that circle, if you like, a dynamic circle, to do with the generation of innovation and how important the role of cities and the role of urban policies and urban citizens is to that process. If you think about resource efficiency, cities get off to a pretty good start. The reason you have cities is almost entirely to benefit from the agglomeration economies, the economies of scale of bringing people together and bringing them either close to markets or close to the source of materials and goods. That's why cities historically have tended to be near ports or rivers or places where they can connect easily with other cities. But increasingly since the Industrial Revolution, you're finding that the location of cities is no longer determined primarily in order to access materials or goods. Cities exist to some extent to make these throughputs and inputs and transport costs lower, but they also exist to get the benefits of bringing people close together and sharing ideas. And cities of the 21st century are mostly driven by that imperative as much as cities in the Industrial Revolution were driven by transport costs. Well, the great thing about ideas, the great thing about knowledge in general is unlike any other material resource, which tends to deplete as you use it, knowledge actually builds on knowledge. It doesn't deplete as you use it. It gets better, it refines, it interacts with other people and with other machines. So this ability to generate innovation at the urban level by bringing people together, this dynamic cocktail, if you like, of specialization and diversity in human beings that cities have, is one of the best ways to generate innovation that drives our ability to use and reuse the resources we have more efficiently. To understand that, you need to understand the dynamics of innovation and investment and the feedback mechanisms from that to behaviors, to cultures, to institutions, which are why cities can take such different shapes and such radically different paths in terms of both innovation, productivity, and also resource use. Let me start with a picture of a city that's not too far away from this one. Indeed, it could be this one. It happens not to be. It happens to be Copenhagen. If you go to Copenhagen, or if you go to Helsinki, which you clearly have, or you go to Amsterdam or certain cities, you'll see a lot of people cycling. And you may want to ask them why they cycle. And the answer you'll invariably get is, well, we have fantastic cycling infrastructure. You may then venture to ask them why they have such good cycling infrastructure. And at this point, they start to look at you as if you're a bit of an idiot. And they'll usually say something along the lines of, well, can't you see everybody here cycles? Now, clearly, it doesn't really matter which came first, the chicken or the egg. Once you've got the physical infrastructure, the behaviors will change. The people will hold their politicians accountable for delivering more cycle lanes. Once you get more cycle lanes, people will go out and buy a bicycle. And you get a very virtuous path, which designs a city to be very different from one, for example, which is based on the motor car through sprawling suburbanization. If you're a mayor and you stand on a platform of cycle lanes and congestion charging in Cincinnati or Minneapolis or Atlanta, your tenure is probably measurable in minutes, right? Whereas in Barcelona and Copenhagen, Helsinki, these are very popular things, and citizens demand more of them. So you get this beneficial cycle. Another example is electric vehicles. We know that electric vehicles are already more powerful, more efficient, and will be cheaper to produce within the next decade or so than combustion engine vehicles. No serious, I don't think any of the major auto manufacturers anymore are investing their narrowing R&D budget into the combustion engine. It's all going into electric vehicles. But if you want to buy an electric vehicle, you want to know that there's an electric charging infrastructure out there. And if you want to build an electric charging infrastructure, you'll want to know there's enough people with electric vehicles to use it. It's another example of the chicken and egg. It doesn't matter so much how we break into this chicken and egg. The important thing is that you do. A lot of this is to do with psychology. A lot of this is to do with expectations. Social psychologists have recognized for years that if you want to bring about transformative change, you've got to get people to expect a certain clarity in the direction of that change. If you're a leader or a politician or a business person and you want to invest in renewables or energy efficiency and somebody tells you, forget it, it's not happening, no one's investing in it, it's prohibitively expensive, and by the way, climate change is a hoax, you'll hold back. You won't invest. If you're that same person and you're told you better move quickly because the rest of the world's moving, this is a fast-growing sector, you'll want to invest. You'll expect the technology cost to come down, just as we've seen in many of these sectors. You'll expect the financing to go from being niche to mainstream, and therefore your finance costs to be lower. And you'd expect substantial new profitable export markets and manufacturing opportunities and abilities to patent new ideas. So you'll invest. And the very process of investing becomes self-fulfilling, because we know that one of the reasons why photovoltaic costs have fallen by a factor of 5 in as many years, the cost of a more mature technology like wind has almost halved over that period. And even for things like lithium-ion batteries, which address the intermittency of renewables, those costs have come down by about 40% over this period. The reason these costs have crashed down is because we've learnt by doing. We've learnt through experience of deploying these technologies, using them, making them better. Okay? But it requires starting that process, and it requires steering expectations in the way I've said. And when you do that, very virtuous things happen. The reason we had a successful Paris Agreement, and we didn't to the same extent in Copenhagen 10 years ago, was because the language had shifted from being one about burden sharing, about sacrifice, about you do your bit, we'll do ours, which of course meant that everyone races to the bottom and relies on the actions of others, to a language of opportunity, of self-interest, of benefiting from taking action towards a circular economy, towards reducing emissions. Once you have that, people behave in a way that brings that about. It's the reason, by the way, that even though Donald Trump has committed the US to pull out of the Paris Agreement, the Europeans, the Chinese, the Indians, and others are going to carry on regardless, because they see the self-interest. In fact, to the extent that the Americans want to handicap their own industry by backpedaling on this, they can steal a competitive march. It's a very dynamic process that leads to change in the right direction. There are other benefits. This is Beijing. Particulate pollution, just one, PM2.5, accounts for up to 10%, in fact more than 10% of annual GDP in China. This is a study by the World Bank using World Health Organization numbers. 10% of GDP is not a trivial amount. This is hours lost in work, the cost of illness, and the cost of premature deaths. Even in the EU, that figure is 5 to 7%. These numbers, if we were to commit them to decarbonization, for example, would mean we could have the climate change problem licked pretty quickly. This is a picture of, I think it's Sao Paulo. No, it's Mumbai. It could be Sao Paulo, it could be Dar es Salaam, it could be any rapidly urbanizing city in the world. Hours of cost spent by having people sit in their cars in traffic jams because of congestions. If you plan your cities, you build integrated public transport, you limit the degree of sprawl, you can start to control some of these problems. And it makes a difference. The poster child of a sprawling city is Atlanta. You can see it's got roughly the same GDP per capita, roughly the same population as Barcelona, but it takes up a lot more space. As a result, its emissions per capita are orders of magnitude higher than in Barcelona or Helsinki or Copenhagen. Not just 10, 20, 30%, 3, 4, 5 times as much. It makes a massive difference if you're building cities in India, in China, in other parts of the world, what model you build on. So to conclude, I think we should spend a lot less time doing what economists love doing, which is predicting the future and trying to talk about what the cost of decarbonization and meeting a circular economy will be, and a lot more time trying to build that, which means empowering cities, which means providing innovative forms of finance for cities, which means allowing cities, the devolution, to undertake the kind of leadership to bring about these kinds of circular mechanisms that drive innovation. Because likes and dislikes, they're not fixed, they're influenceable. Social norms, they're not fixed, they're influenceable. Technology costs, they're not fixed, they're influenceable. And they all feed on each other. The decisions we make in cities now are going to influence on things like transport, on buildings, on industry, are going to affect the institutions, the technologies, and the behaviors we lock into for centuries. They're going to determine whether we can address the climate challenge whilst at the same time taking advantage of resource-efficient growth. We need to design the future. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri. As we can see, it's really about the decisions we make today, how we lead the change and actually make action. But now we have another speech from Mr. Hans Bruynings. Please come to the stage. Hans is leading the European Environment Agency, and over the last 20 years he has conducted and managed research in the areas of environmental politics, climate change and sustainable development. And he will tell you a little bit more about how these circular cities are being created. Please, Hans.
Thank you very much. Well, I will pick up where Dimitri left. I actually represent one of the European institutions, and he mentioned policies and shaping a future. Well, Europe is thinking about shaping that future with an urban agenda for the future that is connected to 12 goals. And that agenda was started in Amsterdam. It's called the Amsterdam Pact in 2016. And as an agency, we actually work on 6 of those. But you could say that almost all of those are connected to the theme of this conference, to the circular economy, whether it's on poverty and distribution, whether it's on climate impact or climate adaptation, whether it's on job creation, they all have to do with the circular economy. And we often hear that cities are important in the 21st century, and this is the century of cities. Well, actually Europe is already the continent of cities, which means that most EU policies are actually implemented in cities. And when we reflect on those policies, one of the conclusions that we draw from our work is that we could improve those policies for cities in at least 3 different ways. One way is to make sure that implementing policies at a city level is more adapted to those cities, because we design policies for countries and with countries and people representing countries or parties in the European Parliament, but we hardly reflect on the implementability, if you want to, in an urban environment. The same is often true for financing mechanisms. We have all sorts of financing mechanisms, but they are rarely adapted immediately to cities and how they can have an impact on financing urban projects. Most of them are at a national level, and then you create at least 1 or 2 more levels and institutions to transfer the money through a bunch of procedures to cities. And the third thing is, and that's our core business, is knowledge. We don't have a really good knowledge base on what is happening in cities. We can downscale some of what we do, but primarily we look at national level data and we compare states, much less so than cities, at least in the official stuff that we do. So those are some of the challenges that we see. Now this morning you heard Janis Potočnik speak about the International Resource Panel work, and I would like to talk a bit about that very briefly, because we also know that on a global scale, the overwhelming majority of infrastructures and of buildings that will be in cities on this planet in 2050 actually still need to be built. And this is an enormous opportunity, because we can do it in the old way, in a wasteful way, in a way that does not take the 21st century boundary conditions of this planet into account, or we can do it in a way that accepts that this is not the model of urban development that we followed largely through the second half of the 19th and the 20th century. And this report clearly indicates that if we make the right choices, we can make a big difference, and that difference will also be based, for example, on European knowledge and on the examples that we are building in our industries and that we are building in our knowledge centers. We've done some work in the agency on cities as well, although we work mostly on a national level. I will not bore you with the details of the reports, just with some of the themes. Climate adaptation will be and is in a number of cities already a massive challenge. The city of Copenhagen was mentioned. Copenhagen is probably the leading city, together with Rotterdam and maybe a couple of others, in climate adaptation. The more circular you can design your urban economy, your buildings, your infrastructures, the better the chance that they will be adapted to climate change if you take that into account from the start. If we think of enabling these circular cities and resource efficiency, we took a look at European cities and what the mechanisms are and the mix of mechanisms that you can use at an urban level to actually facilitate moving towards more resource efficient cities. And then, of course, in many cities, mobility and transport systems are absolutely crucial. We come from a time that we monitor air pollution and some other impacts, and we report on those, to now reporting mechanisms that focus on fundamental systemic transitions in light of low carbon and circular economic contexts. And then you end up with a completely different view on the knowledge base and how you transform that into what cities can hopefully use for their future. But that means we need to step away from the model that we've been using for decades. Yeah? The whole thinking around environmental policies has been based on a paradigm that has two concepts. One is fighting pollution, and the other one is increasing the efficiency of the systems that we know. And this is, of course, a good example. We build more efficient cars that pollute less than we did 20 and 30 years ago. We have some measuring problems and some reporting problems there, but by and large, that is what we do. But you cannot decarbonize a transport system based on the combustion engine. It has a tangential limit in its efficiency gain. So the solution that was already presented by Dimitri is, of course, we all drive electric. Yeah? It's a technology jump. If we could all afford the Tesla and we hook it up in the night and during the day, we have a system that can deal with intermittencies. We store energy, we release it, we make it smart and everything you want. But this is not Mumbai. This is Brussels. Yeah? If we would all drive that same Tesla in the same way that we drive our car today, this would still be Brussels. Looking down from the European institutions at the Schuman Square into the heart of the Belgian institutions. Endless traffic jams, by the way, a rather ugly and scandalous urban design. Hardly any place for cyclists. There is now a little cycling lane. We would use that same car for about 7% of the time. We know that through big data, with 1.2 people in the car, all at the same time. So we plead for a systemic approach. This is about spatial planning. It's about how we combine work and life issues. This is about reorganizing the way we use infrastructure. And so the real innovation, the basis of the innovation, might not be changing just the engine in what we know today, but might be this. Yeah? And this is also Copenhagen, by the way, where we know in Copenhagen that if you put the right infrastructure in, you can actually use that same width of street for about 6 to 7 times more people every day than if you use the old infrastructure. But it's not enough to have cycle lanes. You need a whole system around it. You need a public transport system that links to this cycling. You need companies that offer facilities for bicycles. You need to make sure that your price mechanisms are there. You need to take the class thing out of it, as in many cities where it's poor people who are on the bus and not everybody is on a bicycle or on the bus or on the metro or on the short distance railway system in Copenhagen. So it's a whole systemic approach into changing cities that we need. To wrap it up, we think, based on our knowledge, that we see 3 essential elements. One, thinking about cities of the future from an environment, a circular economy, a climate perspective, has gone from rather simple issues like fighting air pollution or dealing with water and waste to rather complex transitional issues. New energy systems, new transport systems, thinking completely different about buildings and how we make a city a sponge to retain water and release it instead of make it run off as fast as possible. Secondly, we think that this will require rather fundamental shifts in the knowledge that cities use to conduct their policies. And thirdly, if you do that, there is no way you can do it without a deep involvement of citizens, which means that you need to look at cities not as places of problems that need to be solved, but as living laboratories of innovation, social capital, and places where people actually want to come with solutions for the problems in which they live every day. That's how we look at the city. Thank you. Oh, yeah, we stay here.
Heard there are many things that the circular cities need: good decisions, leadership, information, systemic change. But now I would like to hear your opinion. Please take part in our poll that can be seen on the screen. Now, yes. You can vote by using the mobile app. Everybody has it already now. With the Ask and Vote function. You find it there when you scroll down. Or you can log into the address you see on the screen, right there. So, the question is very simple. What is the most important factor cities should concentrate on to drive change towards circular economy? 5 options: citizen involvement. Number 2, cooperation between cities, research organizations, business, and the state. Number 3, enabling circular business. 4, procuring circular solutions and services. And number 5, forcing change through regulations. So please, everybody, now take your mobile phones and vote. Yeah, you can do it also. Yeah, but I have still questions for you.
Yeah.
Well, cities are seen to be the leaders in making the change towards sustainable economy and society. And in Helsinki, we see the city's role vital in driving the change. It doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work. Does it work with anybody? Yes? Who has it going?
Maybe it's overloaded.
Yeah.
Okay, at least somebody has it going. Okay.
Where is small data? We need
keep
small
on
data.
trying still. There's still time. Take it easy. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and you can still try to
You
find.
vote many times.
Oh, maybe that's why it's overloaded. But now, Hans, by the way, you have to do something about your pictures, because you can get really good pictures from Helsinki, cycling pictures and so on. So next time you do your presentation, I'm sure there are going to be really good pictures from Helsinki. But now I have a question for you. How do you see that your agency and EU in general is going good support cities leading the change that you were actually saying that we have a big role in?
Well, first of all, we do work on cities. And when we think of this transitions towards the future, low-carbon, circular economy and protecting natural capital, we focus on 4 key systems: the energy system, the food and agricultural system, the transport and mobility system, and the urban system proper. All of those have an impact on what will happen to cities. So our analysis is really focusing on that. Secondly, we are increasingly working on the ability to sort of improve the granularity of our data and to decompose it almost to the level of cities or urban regions, whether it's satellite information or monitoring information. And a third thing is policymakers increasingly ask for cases. Do not just give us data and information and big maps, give us cases. And many of those cases are actually anchored in European cities. So that's some of the ways in which we try to contribute to this.
Thank you.
Well, actually, this is something where I can continue and ask Dimitri. You were talking about the transition and the decisions that need to be made now. And here in Helsinki, like I said, we have now gathered quite a unique combo. We have the cities, we have the businesses, we have the universities, and even the state together, trying to learn how to make these decisions together and actually pilot and test and make those cases for Hans. So how do you see this meaning of the collaboration and kind of making new ecosystems in a completely new way that we haven't done before?
Yeah, so, the answer is, it's back to this chicken and egg. How do you break in to build a virtuous cycle and not look into the wrong things? And in a sense, my worry with this kind of questionnaire is that these options are almost seen as independent. One's kind of, the magic solution. And actually, they absolutely all feed off each other. I mean, if there's anything you might want to take away from my talk, it's exactly that. It's these feedback and reinforcing mechanisms. So Am I allowed to talk about the poll as an example? Without influencing the voters?
Yes,
so, for example, I'm tempted to say that you're not going to get very far without citizens' involvement, right? But actually, one of the best ways to get citizens' involvement is spelling out the case, which a mayor might do. That might happen through cooperation between cities, or it might happen through enabling circular businesses. But circular businesses are also more likely to provide goods and services if you've got citizen involvement. So someone somewhere needs to step in. Very often it's mayors, but it could be businesses, it could be civil society, to try and initiate this process. Very often it's difficult politically, okay? To build cycle lanes or smart grids, you need to dig up roads. In developing countries, it might be BRT, the different levels of sophistication, but they don't bring benefits immediately, and they usually bring pain. I mean, that picture of Brussels, you want to build the cycle lanes, you'll go through several years where that gets worse before it gets better. So you need strong politicians to spell out why this is in citizens' interests. Otherwise, people will protest, the taxi drivers will go on strike. You know the story.
Right.
So it's a very tricky political economy space, and that's why it's important that you get a common understanding of the challenges and indeed of the opportunities.
Before I let Marilena to continue about the poll, I'm tempted to ask about the examples and the living laboratories, as you, Hans, said, that cities are fun places to live, and we need to keep it that way. So I'm kind of confident that we are taking the right steps now when we're trying to combine everything and kind of do everything at the same time and involve everybody. It's not going to be easy, but we just need to figure it out, I guess. Yeah.
I think one of the critical things is, and I'm now giving the Copenhagen example again, is that...
Yeah. I forgive you.
Okay.
Copenhagen is a wonderful city.
I'm secretly paid on the Cayman Islands by the Copenhagen municipality, so don't quote me on that. I think what is absolutely critical is that there is a long-term vision, a sort of pact around it, so that not every new legislation coming in, whether it's on the national level or on the city level, is saying, well, this was a nice plan, but we start from a white sheet of paper. These types of investments, it's not cost, it's an investment. These types of investments usually take several decades. So if you don't have a sort of social and political capital that accepts that these are long-term goals and objectives, it becomes very difficult, as we see in places where the new mayor says, done with this, or the new government trashes the previous project. So I think that is absolutely critical. In Copenhagen, it would be very different or difficult to completely say, no, we're going to stop all this bicycle nonsense, we're going to go back to increasing the number of cars in the city. It would be unacceptable, completely unacceptable.
Should I pick up on that? I think that's exactly right. And that's why questions of civic governance, questions of devolution, allowing cities to have the power to make decisions and also access the finance for those decisions is so important. Some of that's going to mean novel ways of raising finance, such as land capture mechanisms, but it's also going to require some collaboration with national government. So it's a common understanding between citizens, between businesses, between cities and national governments that the challenges and the opportunities you face, creating jobs, meeting climate and other resource targets, and generating productivity, are the same ones. They're not competing ones. And that's how you get the political capital, and you get a credible long-term framework, which isn't just reversed every time a new party comes into power, that businesses can invest again and citizens can actually act upon.
Yeah. I think that's really important what you brought up about innovative financing as well. So that's very important.
And the knowledge base, as we just now learned. But Marilena, can we try the poll again?
We would like to now see the poll results, if we can get it up there.
All right, we've got some figures.
Okay, somebody has been able to vote. So we have now the winner is number 2, cooperation. Yes, that's what we also, personally, I didn't vote, but that's what I would vote. And that's what Tina actually is also preaching about. And I'm not going to, Dimitri, ask you what would have been your choice, because you already told us that you would have taken all of those. I don't know if it was possible to vote for all of those. But what do you say, Hans? What would be your choice?
Well, I'm glad these are the results that you showed us yesterday, so that I could prepare. I would say, honestly, none of the above, as Dimitri has said. I think, honestly, creativity and vision are the two key elements that one needs. It's about shaping the future and not predicting the future, and that takes courage and a sort of commitment, which you can then apply to all of those. Yeah. So I would have messed up the system and tried to vote for all of them.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's why it wasn't functioning at the beginning. Okay, thank you so much, Dimitri and Hans. Thank you.
Give a warm hands.
Yeah, all right, well done. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, and we will have our next two speakers to talk about city strategy, which is obviously in the core of making all these changes happen. And as we have learned also here in Helsinki when we were building this Smart and Clean initiative, we learned that the ambitious, very ambitious targets and goals are really in the core of making such big transition and the way we actually live. And there we need strategy. And cities, they can provide us with the strategy. So, let's invite our next speakers.
Yes, strategies are definitely important, and I have to say that this has been also keeping me busy lately, because we have a new city council elected in the city of Helsinki, and they are preparing a new strategy for the next 4 years, so they are definitely important. But now we will hear from two cities, Amsterdam and Peterborough, about strategies. So, this is Esther Agricola from the city of Amsterdam. Esther has experience in stimulating the cooperation between heritage, urban planning, and economic development in the cities.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll just invite our friend Miss Katie Thomas from city of Peterborough in the UK, and she's leading the ambitious circular economy program in Peterborough, which is aiming to ensure that Peterborough is operating as truly circular city by the latest 2050s. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Warm welcome, both of you. Okay, Esther, please.
Yeah, I already
please
started.
Go on, sorry.
Good afternoon again. Thank you very much. Let's talk about Amsterdam. And as you probably know, Amsterdam is a very small metropolitan city, about 850,000 inhabitants at this very moment. And we are doing not so bad, but we have a huge challenge. And that is that we are growing very fast at this moment. And besides all the people who are coming in our beautiful city, we have another challenge to face, and that is the growth of the tourists in Amsterdam. At this moment, there are 17 million tourists a year, while we only have 850,000 people living in Amsterdam. And we are heading up for 25 million tourists in 2025. And believe me, they produce a lot of waste, and they put a lot of pressure on the public space. So we have to deal with this. And we said to each other, we cannot only grow and grow. And we see it really as a paradigm shift in scale. Because we decided to put the grow within the city borders. So densifying and intensifying and building a real compact city is our strategy. And the other paradigm shift is about really changing the energy system and the system of mobility. And the third one is not only developing working or living areas, but working on new concepts of living. Quality of life is our aim, and we really believe circular economy can help us in achieving this aim. So where did we start with this thinking? It started in 2014 when we created a new political framework. The first milestone was that we had a special deputy mayor for sustainable cities. And within 100 days, he produced a sustainable agenda. That is what you are seeing in the back. And it's not really a document with all words and visions, etc., but it's a working agenda with 5 transition paths. And I think you know them, like clean air and climate-proof and renewable energy. And the last one, the red one, is maybe interesting, and that's about ourselves. So we said in this agenda, practice what you preach. We should give the good example as the city government, and believe me, I think that's the most difficult path we can take. But in the middle, you see the path of the circular economy, and that is really the overarching path with this putting all together, the overarching theme. So after setting this agenda, we started an in-depth research, I believe as the first city in the world, on the potential of the circular economy and the role of the local government. And what we did, we used a methodology, a city scan produced by Circle Economy, and that was about mapping the metabolism of the city based on the classical linear system, like take, make, and waste economy. And mapping this metabolism gave a huge amount of information. And we discovered that there was really a high potential of added value, extra jobs, extra material savings, and extra CO2 reduction in the system as we knew it. So our conclusion was, looking at this metabolism, that there were 2 important value chains. The first one was the building construction chain, and the other one in Amsterdam was organic streams and foods. And we choose to focus on this stream to base our circular economy activities on. And it was really based on economic and ecological indicators, which makes us, because we became convinced to choose for this path. The second conclusion was that the private sector and consumers are leading the transition. Power to the market, that is our slogan. And the third conclusion was local government still plays a very important role in accelerating this transition. So what we did is we put this research, you see it in the right above, this beautiful research to a market consultation. And we shared it national and international through social media, and we organized a lot of roundtables, and we got overwhelming positive reactions. And it was totally embraced, and that this was really a surprise for us, by the private sector. And together, this consultation and the research led to 2 other products. And the first one is Amsterdam Circular. It's the Amsterdam approach, and it's really about realizing new building areas. And it's about the combination between urban planning and circular economy. And it's about learning by doing. Last week we produced a new tendering system for circular buildings. It's a procedure for the allocation of land and circular buildings, and we are very proud of it because it's a set of incentives and regulations, and I think it can make it really happen. And the second product is our innovation program. And that is about working together between the private sector and the research institutes, all together, also with the slogan, learning by doing. And what we try to do in that program is it's really evidence-based. So we want to challenge all the people in the city. We defined about 60 projects to prove that circular economy is worth it and to learn from it. And we are very curious what will coming out from this. So instead of making visions, we want to start projects and pilots and learning by doing, as I said. So how further? We are going very fast. In the end of the year, we already want to evaluate all those pilots and all those projects. And with this analysis, we want to establish a new policy advice for the next local government. And of course, we realize this is just the beginning. But we are convinced that, and that's what we know yet already, that the urban level is really our playing field. It has to happen at an urban scale. We also perceive that the multi-stakeholders approach is worth it. It's not only triple helix, but it's quadruple helix with the Amsterdam people together. And the other thing is that we discovered we have to share the information. We have to be open. We have to be generous. We have to be transparent. And that's the only way we can work on this beautiful challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I work on the circular economy programme in Peterborough. For those of you that don't know, Peterborough is located about 40 minutes north of London, and it's one of the fastest growing cities in the UK. And by applying circular economy principles at the city level, it allows us to deliver sustainable growth that's resilient to current and future challenges. And as a relatively small city, it means that we can test innovative and collaborative circular economy approaches and essentially become one of these living laboratories to test exciting new circular economy projects. And as we've already said, we're trying to develop a truly circular city by 2050. But we're certainly not creating a circular city for the sake of it. Our circular economy ambitions actually grew from our Smart City programme, in particular trying to create smarter businesses. And this work very much started off by talking to the people in our city and finding out the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. In Peterborough, there's a very high proportion of SMEs, and we found that a lot of them actually struggled to access the resources that they needed. But looking across the whole of this vibrant community of SMEs, they had a whole host of resources, but these just weren't being fully utilised. So this meant that we had an idea, could businesses in Peterborough share their resources? So we trialled this idea in what we called a series of Swap It events, where we invited different businesses together and we asked them what resources did they need, what resources did they no longer need, wanted to get rid of, and what resources they had that they didn't use all the time they could potentially lend to other businesses in the city. And we found that even at these events, we could match businesses up, connect those businesses that wanted to get rid of something with those businesses that needed that particular resource. And this led us to develop an online resource sharing platform, Share Peterborough. And this allows organisations across the city not just to share physical resources such as products, equipment, different waste streams, but also to share people's skills, different spaces and facilities across the city, such as meeting rooms, car parking spaces, and even spare places on training courses. And what's really different and unique about this online platform is that all the resources available on it are actually available for free. And we're working really hard in Peterborough to create a real sharing mentality across the city so that we can make the most and harness the potential of all the ideal resources that are in our city. As you can probably guess from what I've told you so far about our programme, it's very much citizen-focused. And we want the people in our city to guide our circular city journey. This was no exception when we came to developing our circular Peterborough commitment, which allows different organisations, individuals, community groups and businesses to pledge their support to our circular economy programme. It outlines our overall vision of what the different people in our city think a circular city would look like and how they think it could benefit them as well. And as part of this commitment, it includes our practical steps towards developing a circular city, what we call our 7 Rs. And this very much starts with rethinking how we use and how we value resources, to redesigning products, services, business models, and even city systems, to all the way seeking those opportunities to retain and recover some value from items when they do come to the end of their life. As we've already discussed, cities are very much at the forefront of the circular economy agenda at the moment, and they're really driving this transition. Working in this area, I can tell you that applying circular economy principles at this city scale is incredibly challenging, but there is obviously so much opportunity in doing so at such a large scale. And in many ways, cities aren't too dissimilar from living organisms. They require raw materials to function, they undergo complex processes, and from that they produce waste. There's so many resources flowing in, around, and out of cities, and when you add people to the mix as well, it's incredibly complicated. And essentially, you can view cities as complex socio-ecological systems. And we view that our role as a city is to manage these complex resources and manage them and create the enabling environment so that we can manage these resources in a circular way so that we can ensure that we're only using the resources of one planet. And taking this approach very much encourages us to take a systemic view and think about the different systems that operate across our city and think about how they're very much interdependent. And this is something that we've tried to do when we've developed a maturity model to measure our progress towards becoming a circular city. A lot of cities are now embarking on their journey to create a circular city, but there's only a few that have really thought about how to measure progress. And this is really important. Firstly, to ensure that we're really embedding circularity into the DNA of our cities. And secondly, it's important to ensure that we're capturing the social, economic, and environmental benefits of this transition towards a circular economy. And if we can develop frameworks for cities to measure their progress, it also means that cities could benchmark their progress against each other, which could hopefully provide some friendly competition between cities, but more importantly, it could develop a more nuanced way for us to share our knowledge between cities. All cities are different. They face their own unique set of challenges. They have their own unique characteristics. So there's unlikely to be a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to developing a circular city. But we need to, really for cities to continue being the catalyst in the circular economy transition, we really need to be sharing lessons learned, sharing what's worked, what hasn't, and why, so that we can all build on each other's progress, so that we can create the disruptive innovation and change that's really needed to move towards a global circular economy. Thank you.
Please.
Can I please ask you to join us here for a little chat?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Katie and Esther, both of you for your presentations. You were, Esther, talking about Amsterdam approach, and you had Peterborough DNA. But we also now know that in the cities, it's very important that to get everybody on board. I mean, you are as strong as your weakest part, so you really need to work to get everybody on board. So how do you do that in your cities?
Good question. No, it's the challenge, really. I think our strategy is to work in a very broad field, so high industries like Schiphol Airport, the Port of Amsterdam, the universities, the households, the gardens, the restaurants. So we try to involve everybody, so that's a broad movement in Amsterdam. So the awareness of everybody, that everybody plays his own part, his own role in the system is the most important thing.
What about you, Katie?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, we have our Circular Peterborough commitment, which has been a great lever to get people interested in the programme. But it's also very much important when you're taking a systems approach to actually break down the silos that cities operate in normally. So breaking down the silos internally as we operate as a local authority is just as important, really, as engaging with citizens, so that when we're kind of thinking about changing one aspect of a city, we're thinking about how that's going to affect another aspect of the city system, essentially. And one of the things that we found really powerful to engage businesses with at the moment is our online resource sharing platform, Share Peterborough, and that provides a tangible benefit that businesses can really see and understand how that can help them. And that's one way to get them involved, and then you can kind of, off the back of that, then explain to them what a circular economy actually is and how it could really benefit their business.
Yeah, can I just continue there? Because we know that Amsterdam is a buzzing capital city, very busy, growing very fast. Peterborough is, you said, 180,000 people.
Yeah.
Nice mid-size European town that we have plenty. But you were talking about champions in your city, circular champions.
Yes.
So can you please tell a little bit more about that? Because we are all loving to hear about success stories and how this is being done.
So yeah, we've recently established something called a Circular City Champions Scheme, which basically involves organisations in our city that are either doing something around the circular economy at the moment or are passionate about wanting to do something. And each of our champions champion essentially one of our 7 Rs, one of our practical steps towards becoming a circular city. And from that, we really want to use the good case studies and examples from organisations already doing something around the circular economy and showcase them to inspire other businesses, but also to really catalyse some collaborative projects between these businesses. As a local authority, and I work in a very small team back in Peterborough, we have a limited capacity. We can't do everything across the city. Yeah. So actually, by getting more organisations involved who can really drive the change as well, we're massively increasing our capacity as a city so that we can really achieve things.
Great. Esther, how do you do that? Who are your champions in Amsterdam then?
800,
in a big city.
800,000.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, there are many, but we have a lot of startups and a lot of small companies who are doing experiments. For example, personally, I love the 3D experiments. Yeah. And there is a little company who started a project in the neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods could gather their waste, and they could ask this little office what kind of products do they need. For example, wood for in the garden or stones for in the street. And the 3D printer made all this. So their own waste came back in the products they were looking for. Okay. Very nice.
Very concrete.
Yeah.
I'm interested in meters because usually you get what you measure. So how do you measure your success in your cities?
Yeah, that's a difficult one.
Sorry, I only have
30 seconds.
we have the 60 project, so we start an evaluation the end of the year. But we are really looking for a set of criteria. And I think that is something we should do all together in Europe or all over the world, because we should speak the same language.
Absolutely.
And it's very important to make it clear, what do we understand, what do we know, and what are the criteria in which we think this is really circular or not. And we have to talk about that, because then we can really measure.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Do you want to say something
briefly?
About the meters?
I know I briefly mentioned it in my presentation, but we're in the process of developing a maturity model to measure our progress. And it's very ambitious to do this across the city, as you're probably finding. So at the moment, we're focusing on businesses, and we're working with local businesses and finding out what they think we should measure. And we're actually in the process of finalising a model to measure businesses' progress towards embedding circular principles. And then the idea will be to accumulate all these kind of different self-assessments from businesses and combine that with city data that we have to gain some kind of picture of what's happening across the business community in Peterborough in terms of progress. Then the next stage will be scaling the whole model up so that we can incorporate community level and social impacts as well. So it's really a way to measure progress completely across the city.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Give a warm hand to Katie and Esther. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. We've been touching the word business a lot, and business is, of course, something that's without it, our cities don't prosper and grow. And we all know that in this transition that we are talking about, businesses can really create us clean opportunities, new ways to move around, how to eat our food, how to live in the city. And this is where we continue soon, but Marilena, I'm sorry.
No,
now I stole your words.
No. I of course, very much as a director of economic development,
yes,
believe in how we can make more business with circular economy. And it's all about, for me, about job creation. We need jobs everywhere, and we need jobs in Finland. And how do we make the best of it? How do we make good business out of this? So
yes, let's invite our next speakers.
Yes. Business, co-creation of cities and businesses, is that the key factor to the circular cities? More on this by Finnish entrepreneur and CEO of Tube, mobility as a service provider, Pekka Möttö.
Welcome, Pekka. And then we have Mr. Brian Buggy from the City of Vancouver Economic Commission. And he's responsible for economic and business development there at the Economic Commission. But welcome, Brian.
And Pekka, you start.
First, Pekka, floor is yours, please.
Thank you. And good afternoon. And I guess it's fair to say that greetings from the front line of change. Because I come here fresh from Turku. We had a wonderful day. We have been launching our new taxi sharing service in Turku. It was a great day, and it's great to be here now. But, you know, the change does not just happen. Nothing just happens. Somebody has to do something. Somebody has to take the initiative. And somehow I find myself repeatedly being the guy who goes full frontal with the old monopolistic systems. If you want to make friends with the old system, I recommend that you do something else. But this is fun. A good friend of mine, you know, my background is in the Finnish transport industry, and the Finns here know my previous company, Onnibus. And we have made change, and we will make it happen again, this time more widely. A good friend of mine, Sampo Hietanen, will be here on stage tomorrow talking about Mars. So I leave it for him. I'm going to give brief, detailed, and quite interesting view, sorry, wrong direction, of how we at Tube, how we see this totality of what we call the vicious circle of mobility. At the center point has to be the end user, the customer. If any system is focused on anything else than making the customer's life easier, then the direction is wrong, especially in the transport. You see a picture of a mobile app. This is the great thing that has happened recently. The technology makes it possible to provide better service for the customers, make customers' life easier. That's the center point. The need has always been there. Now there are means which come through technology. It's about creating possibilities to move around without owning or using your own car. That's the service ecosystem, as we call it. At the center of every service ecosystem, when we talk about mobility, is public transport in the cities. And it's usually, almost always, owned by public authority. And this is how it must be. Make no mistake. Even me, I'm often seen in Finland as the apostle of free market. But when it comes to public transport, it has to be controlled by public authority. If you make a mistake of trying to build totally market-driven, market-based public transport system in a major city, you will end up with a disaster, believe me. Around this public transport system, you build the ecosystem from sharing economy, car sharing, taxis, whatever, bike sharing. That's how it works. That's how the customer's life is made easier. In our app, we have, this is just an example from Finland. We have information from each and every bus stop in Finland, real-time timetable. That's very easy. What I like personally, city bikes, location, availability, real-time. Very easy, very cool. And that's what makes change. That's what makes it easier to use the system. Then we introduce new kind of services. We will introduce autonomous driving already next year in Finland, believe me. As an end result of everything comes big data. Another mistake, which you must not make if you are a public authority, don't give this big data into the hands of corporations. They don't care about improving the system. They care about business. Our idea is to circulate the data back to improve the whole system. This is a practical snapshot of modern capacity sharing. This is from our taxi sharing service that we've been working for 2 months now in Finland. There's one vehicle, 6 different orders in one route. This means something between 12 and 18 people served with the same resource that the old system would serve only 1, maximum 2 people. That's our reason. Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, am I going to get a slide? Welcome to Vancouver. Who's been to Vancouver? Show of hands? Wow, that's great. Who wants a direct flight, Helsinki, Vancouver? Okay, anyone from Finnair in the room? Because you have no idea how long it took me to get here. So Vancouver, 2.4 million people, but the city of Vancouver is 630,000, so that's about the same size as Helsinki. So unfortunately, that's about where the similarities end. We're very different. We're a very young city, only 130 years old. 130 years ago, we had a logging camp, and I've seen some buildings around here that were bigger than the entire logging camp. So we grew up in a different way, and in some ways, with surroundings like this, it's turned into both a blessing and a curse. So we now have, as I said, 2.4 million people. It's an incredibly diverse city and a diverse economy. And right now, our GDP, our growth rate's at 4.1%. And compared to Helsinki at 2.7%, we could say we're doing pretty well. In fact, as far as we know, in terms of local city economies, we're potentially #1 in the G7. We're certainly one of the strongest in North America. And we've also got a really low unemployment rate at 4.8%. But we've also got forecasted another 1 million people moving into the city between now and 2035. So the growth continues, the pressure continues, so there's really no timing like today to really get on top of this circular economy movement before it's too late. So Vancouver has some unfair competitive advantages, I think. When you're living in that city, you become a bit of an environmental activist. And anybody heard of Greenpeace? Everyone knows it was founded in Vancouver, yes, 1972. So that's been our head start, right? It's been a city that really cares about the environment. So people have been thinking about taking care of their backyard and their city for generations. But it was really in 2008 that we really woke up to climate change and the imperative of climate change. So we ended up creating a whole strategy called the Greenest City Action Plan. We engaged more than 35,000 citizens, 350 organizations, had more than 100 subject matter experts, all coming together over a year and a half, and we launched it in 2011. And in 2011, that's when our work on the green economy really started to take root. And I guess really that would be the first message I'd want to get across, is just how much leadership matters and how leadership can inspire. Because we really do have an inspired community in Vancouver. Citizens still today tell us we can't be green enough, no matter how hard we work at it. So we're very lucky, because we're looking down into the American context, and we know it's a unique corner of North America. So from there, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see we started to experiment in the green economy, and what we learned was how much regulations matter, how much, even though in your poll you didn't vote for it, we're big believers in that. Not that we need to force it, but when you regulate, when you establish rules, policies, programs, you're actually providing a platform for innovation. People will respond, entrepreneurs will respond. And so we've got a very vibrant clean tech community now. In fact, even though we only have 7% of the Canadian population, we've got 30% of the clean tech sector right in Vancouver. And they're all working on the challenges. So we're very fortunate that way. And we created the Green and Digital Demonstration Program a couple of years ago. We've had 89 companies apply. So we've been working with these companies. We've got a dozen or so working on city-owned assets, testing, piloting, going through that proof of concept, and we're literally helping them accelerate the commercialization of their ideas, of their solutions, and getting to market faster. So again, a great example of how a municipal government can work very closely with the business community to stimulate that innovation. We've also just recently launched the renewable energy strategy. And that's a goal to have Vancouver become 100% renewable energy by 2050. Again, we're excited about that because based on our past experience, we know the business community is going to respond. The business community is going to find solutions to help us get there before 2050. And so this engagement process, this consulting, this collaboration that municipal government has with the business community has been critically important to our success in Vancouver. And of course, we know how important it is to track and measure. So here's some data just on Vancouver. 26% growth over the past 10 years while reducing greenhouse gases by 15%. So there's your evidence that you can grow your economy while going green. We've got data in spades to support that story. So what we're now moving to is a zero waste strategy. We want to have zero waste by 2040. All of that work will be done by the end of the year, and this is really a perfect opportunity to segue into the so-called circular economy. We're already, because we're public about it, because we're sharing these ideas, because we're interfacing with the business community every day, we're already seeing entrepreneurs anticipate. We're seeing examples in mattress recycling. We're seeing examples in organics. We're seeing great examples in textiles happening right now, creating small companies, startups that are trying to get ahead of the regulation, and they can see what's coming, and they're hiring people, creating jobs, innovating, and even changing business models and revenue models. So that's the story from Vancouver. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it.
No, thank you so much, Brian and Pekka. Excellent presentations and new ideas to everyone, I'm sure, and I'm always happy to hear the story of Vancouver. It's awesome. It's absolutely fantastic. And Brian, as I'm a great fan of you, your city, I mean, of course, that I have to ask you that, I mean, you have the long history with the city and your citizens, and so what do you actually expect from the businesses, from the companies?
You know, we have opportunities to engage with our business community 2-3 times a week. So we have workshops. We have workshops on, business emission profiles. We've got workshops on, circular activities. We have events to celebrate these startups. We have capital matchmaking events. And now, because of the unemployment is so tight, we're just now getting into the business of talent and career fairs and really promoting the green economy to talent, because quite frankly, we're at full employment. So because of the numbers right now, we're forced to get out there and engage all the time. And you know, we don't have really strong expectations because they've been so responsive. When I say leadership matters, it's not just from the mayor and council. Leadership is happening from the companies, and so it's a great partnership.
Before moving to Pekka, I want to ask you, Brian, with this brilliant success that you obviously have, are there any issues with the companies that are competing with each other and they all want to come to the markets in Vancouver? Do you have any examples, and how have you conquered that?
Yeah,
it's all so easygoing as it sounds like.
So competition is good. Competition makes us stronger. Competition forces people to continue to innovate and outpace each other. Our markets are really small. You're not going to grow your business in Vancouver. So most companies are thinking export from day one.
Right.
And everybody knows how close we are to China. We are by far the closest North American city to Japan, Korea, and China. So that's part of our program, is not only are we helping them accelerate the commercialization on our municipal assets, but we have another program to get them to Asia as quickly as possible. And we have a whole Asia-Pacific team inside of our organization that helps them get there. So it's not about competing for one small pie, it's about growing the pie at the end of the day.
Excellent. So Pekka, you want to grow your business globally, I guess, and you have now succeeded with Qt already here in Finland. But what would be the thing that you need from the city? If you look at Brian here, you want to enter to Vancouver, or you want to make your business here in Helsinki. So what's your message?
Well, in general level, different kinds of enabling. That's what you ladies do here very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Resources, networks, whatever. And then in our particular field, when it's about transport, then we need system-level integration with the public transport. That's actually essential, not only to information, not only the information, but deeper integration with payment possibilities and so on. So working together instead of competing.
Indeed.
Nobody's stealing anything from anybody, but everybody, I love what you just said, this is what I've been saying, making the cake much bigger for everybody.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So here we have an entrepreneur who is talking more about public transportation than the public transportation authorities themselves. So that's an excellent example of cooperation.
Well done.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Pekka, Brian, warm hand.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's time that we are doing some catching up. I think we are running a little bit late. Let's not stop our last ladies to speak. So we're talking about waste. Obviously, if you talk about circular economy to anybody here on the street, they immediately start thinking about waste, how to recycle the waste, isn't it so? But as we know, waste is much more beyond that, and now we are going to hear some stories about that.
Yes, and in Helsinki we have two excellent examples, just to give you an idea. We have, for example, we are using an application to reduce food waste. One of them is called Rescue, and it enables restaurants to sell leftover lunches at reduced prices. Another one is a very good example from one of our new districts called Kalasatama. There we have an application for the residents that they can sell leftover food or ingredients to neighbors. So this is absolutely very handy, concrete circular economy in a small scale, and that makes things bigger when you start with the small. But now, more on recycling, making citizens live better and better, and at the same time, good business of waste. We have here Ms. Elizabeth Balkan from New York. Elizabeth is a senior policy advisor for the New York City Mayor's Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability. Welcome, Elizabeth.
And then we have Funto Borofis from Nigeria, Abuja.
Yes.
And you are the founder and CEO of Achanta Datti Ltd.
That is correct.
So warm welcome, Funto.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Like I was introduced, my name is Olufunto Borofis, and I run a recycling company called Chanjadati that is based in Abuja, Nigeria. Just by a show of hands, how many people here have been to Abuja? Or Nigeria? Let me just even say Nigeria. Oh, you guys need to come visit us. We're very warm and welcoming people. But basically, my story goes like this. I spent close to 18 years schooling and living in the US. And I decided to make that jump to go back to Nigeria probably like 5 years ago. And one of the reasons why I made that jump was each time I went to visit Nigeria on holidays or whatever, at every corner there was a dump site. And coming from, I lived in New York, I lived in Richmond, I lived all over. Coming from a place where there was a culture of recycling, it just broke my heart that waste was just being thrown away or burnt, right? We either have the landfill method of waste management or combustion method of waste management, which wasn't, helping anything. So for me, one of the reasons why I started Chanjadati, which in Hausa means change dirt, is because I understood the value of waste. One of the things that I've realized in the last 2 years of running Chanjadati is the fact that circular economy for us is something that has been practiced in Africa, in Nigeria for a long time. But for us, what it really means is survival. And the reason why I say it's survival is because we are able to create jobs from waste. We're able to empower people. We're able to be inclusive. And we're able to eradicate poverty. And so what do I mean by that, right? Right now, in our recycling company, we deal with different waste streams. One of the things that we've been doing in the last 2.5 years is to be able to build that value chain. We look for off-takers. We look for people who will give us the waste. And we also employ people along that value chain and give them jobs. So I'll give you an example. For those who know a bit about Nigeria, for example, you've heard of Boko Haram, which is like the terrorist organization that has been doing a lot of damage in the northeast. Our company is in Abuja, which is the federal capital territory, and we're also in the northeast. A lot of the young boys that we hire have the potential of potentially going and working and joining up with Boko Haram or coming to work for us. They're able to work for us, they get paid, and they're able to send money to their parents to help them buy cattle. That for us is what is real for us. We've talked to a lot of women who work with us, and one of the key things they talk about is the fact that they're able to get some money into their pockets, right? You talk with women who are going through domestic violence situations, or, in some instances, this is real life situation where I was talking to a woman who knew that her husband was molesting her oldest daughter and was not able to leave that situation early enough because she did not have the funds to leave. She had 4 other kids. And so you find situations like that where people finally break free and say, look, this platform affords me the opportunity now to be able to earn some money into my pocket where I can then move on or move out of horrible situations. So for us, again, when people are talking about circular economy and people are talking about circular cities and everything is so great and so developed, in a place like Nigeria where we're still developing, again, for us, the core message, again, is survival. The other thing is, and I apologize because even though I have pages, I just want to speak from my heart. The other thing that, as I've listened to, different people talk on the stage, and, the thought that comes through my mind is, when are we going to get here? When are we going to get to the point where, Vancouver or London or Helsinki or Copenhagen or Peterborough or, Amsterdam? Because we're not there yet, and I'll be the first to say we're not there yet. Having lived in the US, having lived in Richmond, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, and looking at where we're in Nigeria, we're not close to being there, right? But the one thing that I will have to mention is the fact that there has to be we can potentially leapfrog over, some of the lessons learned from some of the developed countries. And I'm hoping that, again, for those who've never been to Abuja or who've never been to Nigeria, that will be part of the conversation and the platform that we're creating, right? But the other thing that I wanted to just mention is that, it's easy to talk about some of the things we're talking about right here, and we're throwing around terminology like climate change, and we're throwing terminology around like recycling. But a lot of people, the people that we really deal with in the communities that we talk to, right, don't know what circular economy means. They don't know what recycling, that term means. And so a lot of the work that we have to do, which is, again, very grassroots, right, is just even educating the citizenry and saying, this is the correlation between what you're doing, the waste you're burning, recycling, and just getting them used to the cost and effect of what they're doing. So we definitely have a long way to go, but again, I'm hoping that, again, thank you to the organizers of this great forum to allow me to even just tell our story. But I think that, partnerships can be created here. We can potentially, build, relationships where, at the end of the day, we can leapfrog in terms of progress for where Nigeria and Abuja, for example, is, and where some of the other countries are. I mean, I always think opportunity, and let me just quickly, just for the sake of, so in terms of our company, again, 300 tons of waste averted, working with 30 companies, over 100 households served, over 220,000 waste pickers reached, over 12,000 wages to agents. Those for us, even though to other people might not be big, are big numbers to us because of what we've been able to do in 2 years. In terms of potential and opportunity, over 2.1 million residents, similar to maybe Vancouver, just slightly lower than Vancouver, but we have ways to go. And so areas of investment opportunities, innovation and R&D, job creation, sensitization, awareness, partnerships, are all things that organizations, whether public, private, can come into Nigeria and help us. Again, the other thing I want to say is that with a population size of 175 million people, anybody that comes into a situation like that, you can only make bank, right? So I want to invite all of you to kind of consider Abuja, consider Nigeria, because that's the future and that's the place to be. Thank you so much.
If you wouldn't mind, please, just indulging me. That's for my mom and dad. New York City is known for producing incredible skyscrapers, unrivaled arts and entertainment, superb food, cutting-edge fashion, and more. Unfortunately, there's something else very important that is produced at a massive scale by the dynamic economic engine known as the Big Apple: waste. Specifically, New York City generates 6 million tons of household and business-related waste each year. Meanwhile, we maintain no landfills or incinerators in the 5 boroughs, and only small-scale organic waste processing capacity. So much of our waste, like so many cities in the US and all over the world, travels 600 kilometers or more for disposal. There, in landfills, it generates greenhouse gas, as you know. What's more, in these distant landfills, it generates $0 in economic value for the city of New York. In response to this crisis, and following almost a decade of working towards robust sustainability policy goals, New York City committed in 2015 to send zero waste to landfill by 2030. We're determining and redetermining just what is in our waste, and developing solutions for each slice of the pie. This includes achieving the largest organic or bio-waste diversion program in the US. We're now serving over 1 million New Yorkers, and our organics program will extend to all 8.5 million New Yorkers by the end of 2018. Next, we're making recycling easier for all New Yorkers. And we're demanding extended producer responsibility commitments from brands whose products and packaging employ materials like glass that are challenging for recycling operators. We're also integrating textile and electronic recycling infrastructure into high-rise apartment buildings throughout the city, and moving to Uber-style on-demand collection in less dense parts of the city. And finally, we're addressing, through both dialogue with industry and, when necessary, legislation, materials that cannot be recycled, as we believe that goods should be made available to consumers with a promise of durability, repairability, and reusability, so that New Yorkers are not faced, as too often is the case today, with only the option of disposal. We know that to achieve zero waste, we must expand our programs and services, change consumer behavior, renegotiate the reusability and recyclability of what ends up in the garbage bin, and create local opportunities to reap economic benefit from the diverse commodities that we've been mislabeling waste for too long. For New York City, the circular economy is how we will innovate as a city, to drive job growth, to make New York a more livable city, and to retain the global talent, to remain a global capital of talent. But it is also how we will survive as a living city, with complex and wonderful inputs and outputs. Not only to reduce our landfill waste dramatically, but to find solutions that will reduce waste overall. It's not for nothing that the saying in New York City goes, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And so as we continue our work to pursue zero waste and move from our linear approaches to a circular mentality, we welcome businesses committed to the circular economy, innovators and their technological solutions, peer cities with best practice to share, and organizations looking to test and scale the best new ideas. Surely we have a ways to go, but I am confident that the human ingenuity needed to drive change and transform business as usual will find a home, as it long has done in New York City. Thank you.
Now, Funto and Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing your stories. And Funto, thank you for coming. And it's a really inspiring story that you have. What would be needed what would you need to take your operation, your initiative, one step further?
Oh, what don't we need, I guess, is the question. You know, we need equipment, we need technical know-how, we need partnerships. One of the hardest things that for any SME to access is finance. And, you know, one of the things we found is, you know, even when you reach out to international financiers, for example, and you say, oh, you know, we need money, one of the criteria that they ask you to bring are usually not things that companies in a place like Nigeria usually has, right? So it's a lot more difficult. So, you know, we'll take any help we can get. You know, one thing we always say is we don't need a handout, we just need a hand up, you know. So I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, I have to ask you, Elizabeth, congratulations being from the innovation capital, and we still hope that it will stay, but you have all the resources in the world, I would say that. But now when you've been hearing Funto explaining the completely different world and the attitude they must have and kind of to build everything from the scratch, what can we learn from that?
Well, I'll have to agree only partially that we have all the resources. Obviously, there's vast wealth in New York and natural resources in New York and throughout the US. But I think the problem may be precisely that we have so many resources. And so we don't value them. They're cheap. You know, reusing things is considered not only unnecessary, but undesirable. Because convenience plays such a role in New Yorkers' lives. So why would you sacrifice convenience when disposability is so cheap? And so I think in some ways resource limitations can be and must often be treated as a critical catalyst for innovation and resource efficiency. And I would say that when you think about our resources, what is in our waste is actually a resource. Exactly. We don't treat it that way, and so we spend, the city of New York alone spends over $350 million per year on landfill disposal costs, which is insane when you think about those commodities as having value and as being potential levers for economic growth instead of a tax burden for New Yorkers.
Absolutely.
Okay, now it's come time to thank all our speakers. Please stand up. Sitting, by the way, kills, so it's time to stand up. And just to conclude, Tina, what do you think we have learned today?
Well, this is an excellent question, and I started with the 3 points when we started this session. You remember still that cities are leading, we need collaboration, it's a good business. I think we can all agree. Who agrees that this is still true? Yes, but I think with all of you, we don't have any time to get your comments, unfortunately, today, but we can continue with the snacks and drinks, I guess. But I think the collaboration, not only between cities, between businesses, between continents, and with everybody, is really the key to make this happen. And learning by doing, like Esther, you said, I guess that's the way. We can't wait and just make visions. We need to do it right now, but we need to do everything at once, kind of. So I'm really grateful to have you all speakers here. And Marja-Leena, one last point to you.
Okay.
As we are here in Helsinki and the mayor promised that this is the leading circular city, are you going to continue the work that it will be?
Absolutely. We will be leading the way, and we will make my dream come true. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Should we have a picture?
So, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know what's coming next, we have our Block Festival, Helsinki style, outside, drinks, relaxation, food, and then we're going to hear about the world looking in from a NASA astronaut. So relax, enjoy some fun, lots of networking, and then we'll have a couple of inspirational moments a little further along. Thank you all very much. See you out in the Block Festival.